Hello, and thank you all for being here. We have some great panelists here, so there will be no slides, nothing. And let's also change up the dynamic a little bit. So we have some questions that we have prepared for this panel, but if you want to ask a question, don't wait until the end. Ask a question right away. If you want to contribute to the conversation, you're free to discuss with each other as well, interact with each other. So just to start with, could you please present yourselves and your project, your stablecoin, whatever. Okay. Let's start with Mark.
You want me to start? Hello everyone, I'm Mark Ziller. I'm the founder of the Aave-Chan initiative. We are the Aave DAO main delegates and also service provider to the Aave DAO. And in a few hours we do something. So a stablecoin called Go, and yeah, one of the youngest stablecoin in the panel, I guess.
1 day old? Not even 1 day?
No, not in, yeah, 2.5 hours.
Yeah, we will be witnessing a birth of a new stablecoin then.
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay, Robert.
Hey, I'm Robert Lauko. I'm founder and head of research at Liquidity. Liquidity, as maybe some of you are familiar with, is a stablecoin and borrowing system which has been live for more than 2 years now. But just recently, we started working on a new project which would be some kind of successor, yeah, or new version.
Sébastien de Rivaux, co-founder at Steakhouse Financial. We help DAOs on everything related to financial work. So we work for MakerDAO, ENS, Lido, and plenty of others. But yeah, we mainly known to have been working for MakerDAO for the last 3 years and implementing the real-world asset strategies.
Hey, my name is Guillaume Nervos, a co-founder of Angle. So we started with stable euro, the largest one in volume, sorry. So we intend to do other stable coins with the new models that we're gonna talk after that. And yes, that's pretty much it.
Hey, my name is Meyer. I'm co-founder of Fluid Protocol. Fluid is a stablecoin on Fuel Network. So we're building ourselves as the native stablecoin for Fuel, heavily inspired by Liquidity Protocol, but rewritten in Scratch in Sway, which is a Rust-based programming language, and with a few differences from Liquidity, so multi-collateral, partial liquidations, no recovery mode. If you're familiar with Liquidity, you might understand some of that.
Thank you to all of you. So this panel is about a trilemma, because for some reasons we can't have everything good. We always have to choose. We had the blockchain trilemma, we have the stablecoin trilemma. And before going through each of the points of the trilemma, of the 3 choices, let's say, let's start with the design of a stablecoin. Do you consider this trilemma before you start your project, or basically you start with the idea and then you try to respond to each of the underlying factors?
Do you want us to explain the trilemma, maybe?
Yes, please.
So the stablecoin trilemma, you talk about this morning, and you solve it this morning, I guess.
Everything
we
is
should see.
solved.
Okay, bye.
Nothing to discuss.
Was a great.
But you two, you solve it. Everybody solve it. It's like an impermanent loss for DEX, you know. Everybody solved it, but we will see in 6 months. So the whole trilemma is that your stablecoin can be decentralized, scalable, and what will be the third for you?
For me, resilient or robust.
Yeah, peg resilient for us, but it's the same thing. So very close to $1 if you're tracking the USD, for example, or €1 in the case of Angle AG Euro. And it's hard to have all 3 at the same time. Usually, the more decentralized you are with for example, only ETH as collateral, the less peg resilient and scalable you are, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, maybe just to add to it, I mean, there are multiple, I think, definitions. So, I mean, one is looking at the capital efficiency. That's more like an inside view. I mean, that's like how much the protocol, how much value it needs from the underlying asset or network, how well it can cope with the economic bandwidth. But I used to prefer a slightly different trilemma, which is more about the outside view. Yeah, that's more the peg, at least like peg stability, and then also resilience, which is kind of the more the long-term resiliency against like shocks, against like the black swans. And decentralization, I think that's set, that everybody agrees that that's part of the trilemma.
Yeah, but I guess like capital efficiency and scalability is not really the same thing. Like for me, like we started with this trilemma, which is decentralization, capital efficiency, and stability. And I think we're going more toward like, okay, capital efficiency is great. You can like have like 130% over collateralization or something like that. But like earning like this few percentage more is not as important as scalability. And so I would say like right now the trilemma is more about scalability, decentralization, and price stability.
And that's the most important part for me, because some people like to, especially on crypto Twitter, like to have like some kind of PvP mindset. But at the end of the day, every single actual decentralized project, AGO, LUSD, maybe Go, even DAI, is so small compared to the actually centralized asset like USDC and USDT. So the room to grow and the path of scalability allows to have multiple implementation, and I think there's more pathway for synergy at the current state of decentralized stablecoin than actually being PvP on this.
And I guess like just to answer your first question, so at Angle, I guess we have more like an ideology, so because there are like these 3 punts, and so we like one most important thing for us is the stability, because if your stablecoin is not stable to what you're trying to replicate, then you cannot fail. So for me, at least, it's going to be stability before anything else. And then it would be more scalability, and try like after that like to be as much as decentralized as possible. So that's kind of a way of thinking. And so it's just about where you put the cursor, because even like there are multiple ways like to really define decentralization. It could be like on the collateral you accept. It could be like on the processes of the governance. So even that, you have like multiple definitions. So really answering to this question of the trilemma is not that easy, because you're going to have the purest form of decentralization that won't fit your stablecoin.
And I would say the best advice if you want to launch a stablecoin is to be so understanding of what you are doing and the choice you are doing that you not use the stablecoin trilemma. Because if you are staying in the stablecoin trilemma, is that you are not understanding everything. Because we speak about capital efficiency and over-collateralization. You can see MakerDAO is over-collateralized by 150% maybe, I don't know. That's a lie. It's not true. It's not capital efficient. It's capital efficient because for each DAI there is 1.005 assets. That is collateral, but that's a secure loan. And if you go look on the TradFi market, well, there is a lot of over-collateralized loans, and there is a lot of money creation. So it's not because you are over-collateralized that you cannot scale. It's just the fact that we started with only 2 assets, one asset, let's say cryptocurrencies like ETH, and it's super volatile. And not a lot of people want to take loans sometimes when you want to scale. So that's a limitation. But that's just because we don't have good assets on chain, from my view.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that like, yeah, this collateralization ratio is not like the main, I think, limitation of scalability. It's more that loans itself, like margin loans or Lombard loans, or just have like a certain market, and if that market is kind of fully used up, then, but at the same time, you know, maybe people want to buy the stable coin, so then there can be a mismatch between like those who would like to borrow against some asset, no matter what asset, but just some asset, and those who want to own, like buy and hold the stable coin. So I think that's like the main scalability issue that we are facing with like the CDP-based systems.
And you are quite right, because we always speak about scalability on the asset side. If we are just CDP based on ETH, we cannot go higher than the market cap of ETH. Come on, we are not at the market cap of ETH anyway. The problem is not on the asset side. I mean, we have an issue of having good assets, that I fully agree, but the problem is that no one wants to hold your stablecoin, and they are using USDT and UST. So that's the real problem, to find users that want to use your stablecoin, not so much about how you do on the asset side. there is a lot, for nerds it's better to focus on the asset side, but if you want to launch a stablecoin, it's more about why should someone hold your stablecoin?
And that's actually a very important thing, because when you look at the actual market, like the actual people, you have the speculation side of decentralized finance that use stablecoin as a hedging tool. So they want to stay on chain, and they will hold some DAI, they will hold some LUSD, and they will have some kind of protection from volatility on that. But if you look at stablecoin as a payment system, 99% of that is centralized stablecoins. Like if you go to Istanbul for Dev Connect, there's a good chance you can pay your taxi with USDT, but that's USDT on throw most of the time. And they don't fucking care about decentralization because the UX is great. It's cheap, it happens, and they did a lot of work on the Troll network to accept stablecoin in the real life. And that's an important thing to do when you launch a stablecoin, is that what you optimize for. Which kind of use case, what is your audience? That's why there's room for everybody. And for example, Go, on the first day, you can buy socks with it. Of course, you can use ETH as collateral and ST as collateral to buy a loan and buy more ETH if you want to, if you believe the price of ETH will increase, or do exactly the opposite. Use another stablecoin and short anything you want with it. But if you want, you can buy socks, or you can support your favorite content creator on Lens, which is cool. Why not? And I think that's the part that all of us should develop more and more.
But don't you think that we have like a slight disadvantage compared to those centralized stablecoins, because those are the ones that are integrated in the CEXs, like like centralized exchanges, and they're also used for on and off ramp. So they have this kind of built-in advantage. And for really decentralized DeFi native stablecoins, I mean, there is this lack of demand coming from, you know, this exchange facility which allows you to on ramp and off ramp.
Yeah, I think you talk about a really interesting point where you have to make a difference between the usage of the stablecoin, how you use it, where you can use it, and the technology behind it. Because the trilemma, it only concerns the technology, it doesn't care about adoption, it only concerns the design of your stablecoin. And we have seen many stablecoins being created. So we have Angle, we have Liquidity, we have Go. We have stablecoins from the past, like USDC, USDT. And so with all the developments, do you think that the trilemma is still up to date today, or can we find something which suits more the current landscape of stablecoins?
Yeah, in my view, you are just, when you launch a stablecoin, you are trying to optimize for two constraints, one which is liquidity, the ability to move from your stablecoin to dollar, and should be close to 1-to-1, if otherwise not a good stablecoin. But you can decide, well, we are more soft pegged and it works as well, but you should be upfront. And the other one is solvency. Do you have the backing? So if everyone wants to exit your system, you are still surviving. And that was the problem of Terra, and it was obvious since the start. But you just need to draw a balance sheet and see what happens. And you can also see what happens if there is fluctuation in if you have a CDP kind of assets. You can see what are the risks and so on, and you can just see what happens. And then you see, with those two constraints, which you can decide upfront, what do you want to optimize? You might want to optimize a return for the stablecoin holders, return for the governance token holders, and other goals, being censorship resistant, and plenty of other goals. But you need to be sure that you are trying to do what you want to do.
Anyone want to add something?
Well, yeah, I agree fully with the fact that, I mean, it's a multi-dimensional set of criteria that you want to fulfill. It's not just the three of the trilemma, but if you kind of include other elements, I think it could be a pentemma or maybe even a whatever. How many, yeah.
But would you agree that you have two? One is liquidity, the other one is solvency. And we have decentralization. I mean, decentralization, except liquidity and RAI, which we can discuss if it's a stablecoin, all the others are centralized in a way that they are using at least a bit of USDC or other stuff.
Do you think it's that binary?
Sorry?
Do you think it's that binary? I don't think so.
No, I'm just shading it
spectrum.
binary. I mean, you can be have a shade or an even decentralization if the government want to shut you down. and you are now on no exchange and you barely exist on the Ethereum for ETH maxis, well, are you succeeding? You will not get scale. So we are focusing a lot on that front, capital efficiency, and not so much about, well, people that want to hold a stable coin just want to be sure that there is backing, they can redeem if everyone wants to redeem. And when they redeem, it's $1.
I actually agree about like trying to solve solvency. If you have solvency and the price is always at 1, and you can scale, like you can really scale, you can like absorb any demand, then why do you need to answer another question? But like, because you're definitely doing your job, like your job, which is like trying to be stable around something, and whenever you want to exit, you can exit at the right value. So you just solve everything.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I agree that, I mean, you could make the point that decentralization is subordinate to stability, because you could say, like, if there was like a world government that everybody trusts and we know that it will work perfectly and everybody would like it, then you could have a CBDC kind of issued by this agency and you don't need decentralization because everybody knows that it will work. But we are not in a perfect world, and that's why decentralization matters, because we can't have those, you know, perfect issuers of stablecoins.
No, I agree. That's why you need to tend towards that. But I agree, it's not that easy to have I forgot the word. Solvency. Thank you. It's hard to go towards that, but like if you solve it, like if you complete these 2 tasks, like
then you can add decentralization, because if you are not pegged and you are not solvent, I mean, you don't have a business to start with. That's just adding a utility value on top of it.
Well, yeah, I think like you were saying earlier, though, you know, everybody usually puts PEG at the top, and then the trade-off is more in between scalability and decentralization. So I don't think anybody's suggesting you would trade decentralization for PEG stability, because then, you know, if you're totally decentralized with no PEG, it doesn't really make any sense. So
yeah, but on the other hand, also to rebound on what you were saying right before, the PEG sometimes doesn't depend on the solvency. So the PEG basically depends on the secondary market. So it's basically about the trust that people put into your stablecoin. And for example, even if you're solvent and all the people start selling your stablecoin, then your stablecoin loses its PEG.
no, because they are just gonna exit your protocol, and as it is solvent, they're just gonna exit at the value, at the right value, because otherwise you're not solvent. Like if everybody tries to go out of your protocol at the same time, and the price drop, then you're not solvent.
So you can say, and there was if free banking in Scotland 300 years ago, there wasn't a backdrop, and there was the thing, the banks were investing the money, and it was one-to-one until, well, it's not. And then there was one bank that created what they call the option clause, is to say, well, we don't have the money yet, but we will pay you in 90 days, and we will give you an interest in the meantime. And that's where you are breaking the liquidity. But the fact is, if you are one-to-one in the primary market, and I would separate the primary market, which is a protocol, of the secondary market, which is something else. I mean, a Circle has 5 days to redeem. No one was never redeemed at anything else at $1. So it was different on the secondary market, but that's another story. At Maker, for instance, it's always a one-to-one, and we don't have a quality of service, but you can see what are the level of reserves, and you know that 99.99% of the time, it will be $1. And
I think that's a very important distinction you just mentioned. I mean, the primary market and the secondary market, because currently, like as far as I know, there is no decentralized stablecoin that would offer like a liquid primary market that would always mint a stablecoin and also redeem it, because all the ones that offer this kind of minting and redemption, they are using like USDC or some centralized asset in the background. So I think that's kind of what motivated me to kind of think more about like how we could solve this challenge, to have something that powers a primary market like an asset that is decentralized.
But don't you think that on the secondary market there is this element of trust, which is important because, for example, today many people use stablecoins as collateral for loans, etc. So if the stablecoin loses its peg because people are exiting on the secondary market, so not talking on the protocol level, on the secondary market, it can affect the peg. Don't you think that there is this element of trust that is still important for stablecoins?
Depends on how solvent you are. Because at the end of the day, we got like so many, like in the past 3 years and of DeFi, we have so many examples of historical market data of USDC going below peg, like a few weeks ago, USDT going below peg a few months ago, DAI going over peg so many times, like a few years ago. And when it's actually solvent, the equilibrium in the market is back to peg, and that's what you end up with eventually.
And also, like it's more like about angle, I guess, but PSM could be something used by arbitrageurs, so like more pro users, and IMM would be more targeted toward like casual users, I would say. And so if you're fully solvent, it's just going to be this arbitrage, like this kind of arbitrage, and it's just going to be taken right away because like it's a blockchain. So if there's an arbitrage where you're making 10 cents, you're going to do it. And so if you're like confident on your primary market, on your like price stability module or something like that, or whatever it is, then like users can panic and like can sell it for like 80 cents, even if like the reserve are at $1. It would be fine because like arbitrager, you need to have enough arbitrageurs like to reestablish, and if they don't lose face in your protocol. So I guess that's what happened with Circle, which was a depeg on the secondary market, but like pro users just like disconnect their bots because they were not sure about what were the reserves, and that's where come decentralized stablecoins. It's just because you know what are in the reserves, even if you take real world assets. There could be some issues with that, but you kind of lose this trust on the auditors that Circle used or something like that.
It also depends on how you decide, how you define as a protocol your risk models. Like a good example of that, if, for example, a lot of stablecoins will use stake ETH as collateral. And when you look at the history of ST from Lido, you got like a few events of depeg. So the protocol was working perfectly, like people stake their Ether and it's 1-to-1, but before Shanghai, the actual merge, it was a one-way street, so it was impossible to convert your ST into ETH. No, it's a possibility, but you got a few events of depeg for the ST, but the actual intrinsic value of ST was actually 1 ETH. And the thing is that all your protocol define this risk model. Should you, as a protocol, only look at the primary market and say, well, if the node operator are still working and the Lido protocol is solvent and everything is working correctly, should I care that right now on Curve they tell me you can buy 1 ST for 0.9 ETH? Should I care as a protocol? Should I liquidate my users or act on it? Or should I adapt to it and say, maybe my price feed, the way I price the asset will be different?
Yeah, maybe it's fine if you have like a long-term guarantee or at least a very strong expectation that it will return. So yeah, I think that there is this kind of trade-off that sometimes maybe it's better to relax like some short-term goal to make sure that in the long term you can hold it so that you have like fewer trade-offs in other areas. So
and that's why we design with Chainlink to have like asynchronous Oracle price feed updates on those specific assets that will look at the secondary market, but in a very specific market event. If there's like a hike of outlier volatility on the asset, maybe the protocol can consider the primary market and say, okay, secondary is one thing, but maybe the right answer is on the primary. But it's how you design your risk model that makes your protocol more resilient or not.
But so I definitely get it, and so I'm kind of in the same spirit, I guess. But I for stake ETH, for instance, I guess we underprice like the risk of stake ETH. So you get like your 5%, but we maybe doesn't have like the backlog like to really assess the risk of it. And so maybe doing like this hypothesis like could be at risk for the protocol.
It's super hard to design because we talked about ST8, but for example, USDC. USDC can be used as collateral. Should I care as a protocol if USDC on curve is at 92 cents? Or should I consider that I have some positions that are underwater on paper, like the protocol should consider that their factor are up to liquidation, but should the protocol allow those liquidation or just wait for 1 day, because that excess debt probably not going to turn its head into bad debt and user that lose actually money. And it's extremely hard to design, and there's no good answer, and we all have to learn from each other to make the full model and the full decentralized finance more resilient on this.
And I actually really like that. So because during the USDC peg, so at Angle we were pricing it from Chainlink. So when it dropped, it was at like $0.85 or something like that, 0.9, I don't remember. And so we were like selling those assets because basically people were redeeming the euro for USDC. And so like in our head, we were like, okay, so we may be selling it at a loss because I guess it's not at this price, but it was an hypothesis. And so like, I guess as a protocol, you shouldn't make any hypothesis, whether it's gonna go up or down. So that's why, like, I was pretty happy that we sold it at 0.85 and that we just clear the position. It happened like it went up after that, and so we made a loss. But in my opinion, the protocol should be like agnostic about this kind of, yeah, USDC is gonna go up after that, or it's gonna go to zero. And so that's funny because it's so for Maker. So Maker, it was priced at $1. And so there was like kind of another hypothesis, which was, okay, so it's going to be back to $1. And so in the end, it was a good trade for Maker because you just like price it at $1. And so you just like got a lot of USDC in the PSM. And so it was all good. But I guess in the end, you don't want to make this hypothesis.
So yeah, I think we knew it's not perfect. But people now clearly understand there are true price for stablecoin, and you could already understand that 2 years ago when there was an issue on the Oracle price of Compound, where DAI was 1.4. I mean, you cannot get $1.4 per DAI, that's for sure. So there is a face value. If you buy DAI above $1, well, you are doing a mistake. So you know that the max price of any stablecoin, except maybe liquidity, it's $1. And then you have a secondary price, which is the market price. So you shouldn't let people to deposit one USDC and say, oh, that's $1. You should take the lower price. And Angle does it. I think sometimes you have two oracles and other protocol as well. And you take always the best one for the protocol. Yeah. So you're always winning. And that's the kind of stuff I think we should do. Because if you use the market price, and we always discuss, again, because we are CDP-based in this economy, using ETH as collateral to take a loan, we liquidate. I mean, everyone is speaking about liquidation. Let's liquidate USDC. Let's liquidate real world asset. And I was like, no, we cannot liquidate real world asset. Come on. And people want to liquidate whatever the price. And if we all liquidate USDC, I mean, the price will go to zero. And then we are not good because we will just sell all collateral to zero. Because programmatically that will happen. And that was already the case with ETH. At some point, there was a big liquidation of 600 million and MakerDAO at one point. I mean, it was saved a few minutes before the deadline. What would have happened if we would market sold 600 million of ETH in a short period of time? So, but market price in a bad event is not a good price neither.
But I think that's also a consequence of maybe not the most efficient liquidation mechanism design, because I mean, that's what we try to improve upon at Liquidity, that you would basically already have the assets available, like the stablecoin, like the debt asset, so that when you need to liquidate the collateral, you don't need to sell it because you already have the buyer kind of pre-selected, like for this case. So it means that, yes, I agree. Like if you want to like fire sale something, you have to be very careful because you will like impact the market price potentially a lot, even with Ether.
And in TradFi, they did the same thing in 2008. There was a lot of selling on AAA ABS or RMBS. There were 20, I don't know how far down did it go, but at the end, they were kind of all redeemed at par or very close to it. because well, there is no buyer. Oh, the CDP for AAA RBS are not working. Oh, I need to sell the asset to buy something else. I have no other choice. So fire sale liquidation kind of works those days, but if we go 10 times bigger than what you are today, it will not work.
It's actually a very interesting set of remarks because I think there's a lot of room of improvement in liquidation models. So everybody got inspired by MakerDAO, and we should give credit to that of the CDP model and the liquidation auction. But then we went with Compound and Aave to a partial liquidation. So you have a health factor, and then you have a close factor, or a way that anybody in the world can pay debt on behalf of the user in exchange of a liquidation bonus. But there's more and more innovation in this space, and I think there's room for improvement in this space. Like, they are not in the panel, but they are part of the organizer. Like Curve USD have like a very elegant model of liquidation range bounds that does this gradually. And I think 1 year from now, we will all improve our models.
I think there's an improvement to like liquidations done as Compound and Aave, which was introduced by Euler, which was basically liquidating just enough to go back to a health factor that is correct. And we implemented that at Angle, like just lightly modified it, but like we inspired from that. So I think it's already a good improvement on the CDP model.
I think it's an interesting point because, well, when you design a protocol, you have to stick to the code. You don't get to make decisions. You, for example, if you have to liquidate a loan, which is a bad loan where the collateral goes down, then as per your design, you have to liquidate it. Otherwise, if you decide like, yeah, it might go up again, you're a fund manager, you're not a protocol anymore. So I think this is where it's interesting to see like the design and the code for each protocol about the liquidations, about everything. And I think that we still have to emphasize the education about protocols, about liquidations, about like the prices, the risks, the collateral, which collateral should be used, which collateral can be used, which is the cap for the collateral that can be deposited into your protocol, etc., etc. So I think these are really interesting points that we have talked about. And let's get back to the trilemma and to the stability point. I think, Robert, you could get a great input on this. So as we said, we are aiming for stability, so the peg around $1, and you have chosen a soft peg, which is not exactly $1. It's, I think it's 1.1 and 0.9, something like this.
1 and 110.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so why did you choose it? And do you think that it's more efficient than to maintain a hard peg?
Well, I mean, just going back, I mean, that's the design of our current liquidity system, which has been now out for more than 2 years. I mean, of course, it was partially influenced by Maker's design, and Maker, like single collateral DAI, initially, I mean, they only had a soft peg, which means that, I mean, they could manage the interest rate, like the stability fee, but they couldn't really do anything to keep it really close to 1. I mean, just changing an interest rate may not have a very direct or immediate effect on your stablecoin or the price. So what we did with Liquidity is that we introduced like an asymmetric hard peg, like a hard price floor, which only acts on the downside, so to say. So we have this direct redemption, so people can basically come and redeem their LUSD for basically at face value, so they get like the ether from other borrowers. There is a fee which is dynamic, but if we abstract it away, you can say like more or less there is this hard price floor downward. But there's nothing similar on the upwards, like on the other side, except for when the token, like when the LUSD gets above 110, because then you can do an arbitrage by just taking out the maximum amount, the maximum LTV, which is like a bit more than 90%, and sell it on the market. So you can just do an arbitrage trade by getting up to the maximum with your debt. So that kind of confines the LUSD price between those two boundaries. But it was, I mean, it was already like a decision to make it so that now people have a kind of belief that it shouldn't be completely off. But of course, it's a soft peg because even though there are mechanisms that would make it so that it should be closer to 1, we cannot guarantee that like And we have seen in the past that it sometimes traded like 2-3 cents above, or even 4. I mean, it was a decision to kind of improve upon DAI, but without introducing like the peg stability module, which would then kind of go against decentralization.
Okay, and now going to you. Yeah, Sebastian, sorry, I was confused. So Sebastian, I went to your website, did my homework, saw that you have a lot of people focusing on real world assets and that you're working with many DAOs and Maker is part of the DAOs. And we have seen that Maker are integrating more and more real world assets into their treasury. Do you think it's something good for the stability over stablecoin? And have you seen any projects doing it really in an efficient way?
It's still early days. So I came up to do real world asset by accident 3 years ago because no one wanted. And I thought it would take 3 weeks. 3 years later, we are still almost nowhere. But MakerDAO has invested close to, or will be close to 2 billion in many treasuries, but also real estate loans with a community bank in the US and plenty of other projects. It's quite challenging, but actually it's the part of the key solution. And again, if you look, we are all, most of us are, so you just say that, well, MakerDAO made the decision to use the PSM and USDC as a way to, well, you deposit 1 USDC, you get 1 DAI and the opposite. That was not an easy decision. There was a lot of people hating us, or hating those people that made the decision. I was for it, but I wasn't obviously voting a lot. And now, those days, everyone is using USDC, and it's not a real world asset. It's, well, is it still centralized? I mean, we are all using it a lot, so it's less an issue. And I think the same thing will happen with a real world asset. They are super centralized, or you have, there is always, well, USDC is fine, but if you go in a real world asset, then you are no longer censorship resistant. I mean, it's the same thing. And you can say, well, you can deposit the liquidity in a big balancer pool of USDC, so you cannot be blacklisted, but they can just blacklist otherwise that is on the other side of the depositor in the balancer pool. So there are a lot of limitations. And if, I think to go a bit beyond, having just USDC or other stablecoin as an asset doesn't make much sense because you already have the stablecoin. So why do you have it on the asset side and on the liability side, the stablecoin issue, so there is no value really. So you need to find a ways to scale, to go back to the trilemma, to scale. And that, I mean, except if there are a lot of people who want to borrow again their ETH, which is not the case at scale and might never be the case at scale, well, we need to find something else. And if you look, the whole banking system in the real world is based on fractional reserve banking. So making loans, you have interest on the asset side and you issue a bank deposit, or let's call it tokenized bank deposit, to be a bit more crypto. But the stablecoin is quite similar in the sense that, well, you just need to be able, when you deposit something, you get the stablecoin. And it could be almost anything. Yeah, ideally, something that should be issued is the unit of account of the currency, so US dollars, and usually a loan, a bond, or whatever you want that is increasing in value over time. Could be a bit of volatility, but something that increases in value over time and that is not too risky. And so that's what we call real world asset, which is not that complex. And if you look at CDPs, they are just loans issued in US dollars, in US dollars, and accruing interest every 12 seconds. So they are all the same kind of assets. And to your point, if you wait on someone to take a loan, you cannot scale by keeping the peg because you need someone to act, and he might not act. So you need to be able to buy assets, and you can have arbitrager, as you said, that will fix it. So real world asset, especially T-bills, I think that's the movement we are in. MakerDAO has invested a lot off-chain, which is not great, and not so much for decentralization, because if we invest in tokens, the fact that we have tokens instead of a trust in BVI buying T-bills through a bank signum in Switzerland doesn't change much the problem. It's just that we remove from governance the burden of doing those very complex legal details. So I think that's how we will scale. We need the real world asset because most of the stuff is in the real world. And to scale, yeah, we will need those. But we should make them tokenized, and so we could still have stablecoin protocols that are fully on-chain, except one of the assets is kind of USDC, real world asset.
I have two things to say to that. First thing, real world asset is a shitty name because what happened on the blockchain is real. Like my Ether is really more real than most things that happen in traditional finance. So I prefer like off-chain assets. That's my personal preference, and I try to shield that naming. But the second thing is like more serious, obviously, is don't you think all these off-chain asset attractiveness is that temporary? Because in the sense that right now USDC is printing money, it's a cash cow, and the same thing with USDT. I think they made $3 billion profit last quarter because the central banks, there's some kind of inflation, the central banks increase the rates, so you have risk-free-ish product, or at least high-quality bonds that print money right now. But what was pre-pandemic the yield on this kind of product? And I don't know if, like personally, and I would like to know your vision, I don't know if it's something super interesting for the next 18 months, but 3 years from now, when inflation will go back to nominal rate, and you will be happy if you make 0.5% on treasury bills, real world asset will be so sexy at this point.
Yeah, just a quick word. So, yeah, I guess like you should not like close doors, and this would be closing a door and just staying on the blockchain. So obviously, like in general, you consume real assets, and so I would not like to close this door of consuming.
Yeah, for sure. Like every option is open, but I have the feeling we find this option super sexy, but that's historical outlier in terms of yield.
And I'm also like just wondering. I mean, if you imagine like let's say a very simple DAI, whatever, like stablecoin, which is just collateralized by T-bills. And even if you are kind of, let's say, giving the yield of the T-bill to your stablecoin stakers or holders, I mean, what you ended up creating is just a wrapper around T-bills. Like, why wouldn't then people just hold on or just like invest in tokenized T-bills in the first place? So that's a kind of the question. I mean, by just adding, I mean, it has to offer a value on top. Otherwise, it's a bit, yeah.
As you want.
Yeah, no, I can take this one. You are completely right, and this is my thesis that no stablecoin. So the stablecoin, the interest you should pay to the fees you should pay to the person holding your stablecoin is should be risk-free rate plus the credit risk of your protocol minus the utility value you provide because well you have a cool stablecoin, plenty of integration because you are sold. And so the risk-free rate will not go away. Let's say it's 0. You still have the credit risk. You can say, well, MakerDAO is not risky, so it's fine. Don't give me anything. Or you can say, oh, MakerDAO is risky, smart contract. Who knows what will happen with a smart contract, and so on. So you make a risk. And utility value, I mean, honestly, we are in a TradFi, it's difficult to make a competitor to a bank. I mean, in DeFi, you just copy-paste the code. So the utility value will be close to 0. So that means that every stablecoin will have to pay the risk-free rate plus something more. And so you will not be, because someone will create a stablecoin on top of T-bills, that for sure. So you will have to give a bit more, so you will have to take more risk. So you will have to get some equity buffer or whatever you want to call it as a protection for your stablecoin holders and give a bit more of than the risk-free rate. And that's different versus the TradFi, because in TradFi, well, you don't get the T-bill rate, you get 0.5% instead of 5%, because, well, no one can move. You cannot buy something with a T-bill. You need a bank account. But in crypto, I mean, if I want to buy something with a T-bill, an ETH, or a wrap Bitcoin, I can. I don't need to go to a stablecoin first.
No, I mean, I see the added value of liquidity, like, if you can build a stablecoin on top of something else, which makes it then much more usable for transactions or exchanges, then of course you can maybe even justify a lower yield or justify the added risk, like just contract risk. But that kind of implies that you have already built out like your liquidity or like accepted like in many places, right?
But then there is an answer before that. So you said, what is the trade-off between just holding these T-bills and having a protocol owning it for you? It's the same thing as you have an AMM that you can just deposit liquidity and, okay, let's come back like 6 months later, and you will see what happened. And it's because it's handled for you. And so as it's code on chain, you can like check the record and see how it works and see if it fits to your vision. And so that's what you are buying kind of. It's just like the ease of mind to not have to look at your position every 3, 4, 5 hours, days, I don't know, you name it. And so that's really what you're looking for. It's just because if you want to have not even mass adoption, but just like people in general, like people over here, even me, I don't want to look at my position every day. I just want to look them one sometimes and just forget about it. And so that's what you're looking for when you have like a stablecoin protocol. And so just a little thing. So we also like we're gonna release a V2 of the AG Euro, and so with a new price stability module. And so what we offer, and so it's going to be real world asset and T-bills. And so what we offer is that you're going to be 100% sure that your exposition to one of the assets, so like for the case of USDC, for instance, it never will go upper than X%. And so you will know for every time that you cannot lose more than this X%, even if the asset goes to 0. And so that's automation, and so that's what I'm looking for on the blockchain. Just like to handle it for me. I look at the code, I'm like confident on what it's gonna do, and just like do it, and I will keep my AG or your stablecoins or whatsoever.
Okay, yes, we have 10 minutes left, a little bit less. So there is one question I wanted to ask you all, because it's something interesting because we talk about the capital efficiency, basically the amount of money that you have to spend to get a loan, to get a stablecoin. When Vitalik last year presented southbound tokens, he said that this could be a path to a loan without any collateral. Do you think that it's something that we can achieve and therefore achieve capital efficiency, basically max it out? Or do you think that we still have a lot of time before it comes in and there will be some factors that we will need to consider in order to have it?
I think that this is a really interesting idea. I mean, there are now a few like uncollateralized lending platforms like say Goldfinch or Maple, but they are all just using, I guess, USDC or some existing stablecoin. So they have lenders which they need to match with the borrowers. But why hasn't anybody built a stablecoin that is given out through uncollateralized loans, like where the loan itself is given out in this new stablecoin? Of course, you need to have some on-ramp and off-ramp, which makes it more difficult then.
FTX was about to do it, so.
Yeah. But I think that could be an interesting novel approach, because then you are the one, like your stablecoin will be the one benefiting from the seigniorage. You are not giving it away to USDC. I mean, the problem with like those lending markets is that, I mean, the lenders need to get like paid, of course. And I think it could be a better deal overall if you can mint your own stablecoin to give it out as an uncollateralized loan, which is then basically backed, of course, by reputation, maybe also by legal agreements. Of course, it's not fully decentralized, but it's another.
Then it's a real world asset if
realm.
there is a legal agreement.
It's what you optimize for. It's always the same thing. Is that if you optimize for pure decentralization, that's not the base case. And also, we have a lot of historic market data on the collateralized loans and how they end up. I think Celsius was the biggest one, but unknowingly. And it's always the same thing, what you optimize for. And I have the feeling that in the panel, you have like a good like representation on the spectrum that, for example, liquidity will be more on the decentralized side of the spectrum, and the other ones are somewhere else on that spectrum. And I think it's good you have several options in an ecosystem anyway.
And do you think in the long term we could see self-repaying loans? For example, you put ETH as collateral and basically the staked ETH as collateral, and basically your the interest that you earn on that Ethereum basically repays your loan automatically. Same thing with other basically proof of stake currencies. Do you think that's something that can be done and something that would be efficient?
Alchemix probably gonna do a V2 or V3. I don't follow like the versioning numbers, but that's what they do. That they will probably The thing is that it's self-repaying, but the money has to come from somewhere. So you are basically giving out if you are like using ST-ETH, you are giving away your yield in ETH in order to repay your loan that is based in USD. But me, for example, I think that ETH will overperform USD, and the why I use stablecoin as an individual, and that's not a financial advice, is that I believe that my ETH has more value than dollars. So I'm shorting the dollars each time I use DeFi. That's the main use case of DeFi for me. And the thing is that I don't want to sell my ETH yield for dollars because I think ETH is more valuable. So it depends, many options in the ecosystem.
And just like self-repaying debts is like great, but it's like UX. It's not gonna change the world of stablecoin. It's just, yeah, it's easy for user. It's automation. So as we were talking about before, you don't have to look more to your position. But this is really not like a groundbreaking thing.
It takes like 25 to 30 years to repay your alchemist. Good luck with that.
Oh yeah, well we're more on the spectrum with Liquidity, so yeah, we don't do any under collateralized lending, and then yeah, so we will support staked Ethereum as a collateral, but yeah, we're not going to use part of the stake yield to repay the loan, basically. So.
And maybe just to close or not close, we'll see. On the uncollateralized lending, I mean, we agree that you need a legal argument, or most likely an illegal argument, because otherwise, well, I just have to lose my reputation, so good luck. I mean, that will be exploited quite easily. So it's a real world asset, but if you cannot do unsecured or secured on the person or a business, which is not unsecured, but it's not secured by something specific, well, what are we doing? I mean, except us that we have some ETH and we can borrow and it will self-repay because ETH is going up, because we were earlier than the rest of the world. I mean, what good are we doing? If you cannot replace the bank, why are we trying to create a new financial system if we are worse than the bank?
And how would you do that as a DAO? Like, who decide what's the good credit rating and where you should mint money out of thin air? I mean, I'm not in DeFi for this, for sure.
I think that will be always outside. There could be some communities that will be managing, and stablecoin protocol will just try to have a diversified allocation, and it will be kind of a real world asset.
And we are talking about DAO, so let's finish it up with decentralization. I think it would be great for you, Mark, because you work for Aave company, then for Aave, then you created your own initiative now, which allows people to submit their proposals for Aave to improve the protocol. And so on the spectrum of decentralization, what do you think the aim for stablecoins and protocols where should it lie?
I'm in favor of diversity. I'm not I don't have the ego to say we have like the best option and it will be this option for the next 200 years. And that's why maybe we have like some disagreement, or not really like argument, but with the fact that protocol should be immutable and governance-less. Because for me, there's a very thick wall you will hurt yourself, is my protocol future-proof and absolutely perfect and doesn't need to change for the next 200 years. And as a human being, making mistake as every human being, I like to let the door open to say maybe we should change things up in the future, and all we do that in a decentralized way is to have a decentralized governance and a decentralized autonomous organization. So that's more our vision on these things.
Well, just a quick point on that. I mean, I agree that, of course, you cannot do something that will work in 100 years, but being immutable doesn't necessarily imply that you cannot gracefully unwind your existing system and build a novel one where people can migrate. I mean, even that isn't easy. So, I mean, but Maker has done it to some extent. I mean, with single collateral DAI and multi-collateral DAI.
And we done it with Aave V1, then V2, then V3, MCD. We all done it, but it's a pain in the ass for liquidity fragmentation. It's a pain in the ass for migration and things like that. So I have the feeling, that's my personal point of view. I'm not saying I'm like smarter than everybody in the world, and that's the truth, but I have the feeling that it's good to open doors for some kind of wiggle room that you can evolve with governance. And immutability is more fit for protocols and less fit for application, at least in my eyes.
I think I would say it's the opposite.
And
Yeah.
let's agree to disagree. That's a great panel.
I think we need both kind of protocols. I mean, I think centralized one have some benefits, decentralized governance on top of mutable protocols. I mean, if you have a stablecoin, but you have a lockdown on 7 days before making any change, and everything is on chain with some safeties that no stablecoin protocol offer now, maybe not this one. But and even there, I mean, you get a lot of slack on using chaining, which has a multi-sig and so on. I mean, we can always debate on. We are not at the end game for sure currently, but we are going there.
But there is still room for. I mean, you can still try.
We can always improve, and I think we will improve in many directions, and then the market will decide. I think there is place for stablecoins that are completely censorship resistant. I don't think that will be use case for the rest of the world, but for maybe for the people in this room, most likely. But centralized, companies will also do stablecoin, and decentralized will do as well, as long as it remain on-chain. I mean, I'm working on real-world assets for MakerDAO, which are off-chain, so first step would be to migrate them on-chain.
So just like quickly, for me, like decentralization should just like, at least like DAO, like rights on the protocol should be long-term vision. So I guess like a bit like Mark, so yeah, it should be like long-term vision in general, and you should not like having like some plugs that you can like put in short-term period, and so it should be autonomous in the sense that it's fair like for everybody. Like you can always interact, you know how you will interact with it, and you know that nobody can like screw you like by just passing one transaction, and for me that's good. That's good enough actually in this setup actually.
Yeah, so I think a lot of what we've been talking about today has been about maybe the biggest decision developers can make, which is collateral types basically. So I think that's where the main use of governance comes in for a stablecoin. I think it's the main challenge for like an immutable one. With liquidity as well is like, you know, if you choose staked ETH, then what if there's a different liquid stake derivative which comes out? So if you could have a protocol that was multi-collateral and could add more collateral types without governance, that would be great. But that's kind of the main downside, I think, for not having governance. But yeah, I mean, obviously that's a trade-off. So yeah, we're opting not to have governance, but we're going to be multi-collateral. So we're going to try to put in a few different collateral types at the beginning to try to increase the scalability there.
Well, thank you very much. And as Garrett said in the beginning of the day, we have gigabrains in the house, and so talking to each other, I think that all of you are smart guys, and I think we can all learn from each other, see what other people are doing. So please give it up for the speakers. And maybe we have some questions, if someone wants to ask a question.
Hello, thank you for the panel, very, very interesting. I enjoyed it so much, I think all of us. So much content to dig in. But I still, I have the view that in the industry we kind of depegging from the initial idea of what's the end goal of stablecoins per se, right? Sebastian, I think, pointed out in that direction. I mean, we are very much focused in the direction of this is a financial asset that traders we can market make and get some profit on it, but we are losing the part of this is in the end a payment instrument, right? And what's a payment? It's not a financial transfer. So payment implies in the involvement of real good and services transactions behind, right? So if we want to replace that as an industry with something better, we need to replace the system as it is. And what drives the singleness of money in the system, in the current system that we have, is something that we need as an industry come together and design it better than we have. And the singleness of money in the current system is determined by having the settlement, a common settlement asset, basically. That is the central bank liability. They call it outside money. They call it outside money. It's not really outside money because it's already inside the banking system. But it's the common asset that no one has access to. So I think we cannot compete with that unless we agree as an industry on a common outside asset as a digital commodity to settle. And I see a big threat as the tokenized deposits on this, because tokenized deposits are in a closer distance to the hierarchy of money, to access to the central bank money, than stablecoins. So I think these are real topics that we should discuss. I don't know what's their view on this topic. Understanding the hierarchy of money, I think.
Yeah, you are right that singleness of money is something that might kill us, because as an industry, we are not moving in this direction. I mean, I'm not peg maxi because of the singleness of money, and otherwise you read the BIS and all the regulators saying, oh, DeFi is not good, stablecoin are not good, no singleness of money, and we can come back to the secondary exchange between primary exchange that we discussed previously. And tokenized bank deposit is exactly the same thing as a stablecoin. If you remove access to the Fed, it's just that people don't understand that a token is actually a ledger on the smart contract level, so they don't see the link. And if you read my last blog, I explain why we can achieve singleness of money quite easily without central bank currency, because T-bills are kind of, I mean, it will work the same actually if you regard closely. And a loan against ETH in this industry, if you have a collateral ratio of 200%, it's considered risk-free. So you just need the unit of account and it's fine. You know the price of ETH and you can create arbitrary money that is good for this industry, probably not for the regulator, but for this industry. But you are right that if we cannot show a unity of having stablecoins that are $1, and it's not to say that we should, but if we don't, then the regulator will say, no, that's not singleness of money, blah, blah, blah. No one will understand what they are saying about, and they will shut us down and put tokenized bank deposits, which are way less safer than just a stablecoin issued on top of a T-bill.
Or will they shut down LUSD?
Sorry?
Or will they shut down liquidity? Like, it's immutable, it's on the blockchain. Like, they cannot do that.
Yes, no, they cannot. But how can liquidity be used by a billion of people if they are not allowed to use it for payments?
Well, I mean, currently no stablecoin I'm aware of is used for payments, but I mean, I think that's kind of an overall like regulatory challenge. So currently all the stablecoins are in this bubble, like in this DeFi world, and Liquid is not an exception there. So yes, I mean, in that sense, I mean, but that's a challenge, I agree. I mean, we need to kind of tackle together, because only together we have a chance to kind of convince the regulator that may, like hopefully in the future, there will be something which is better than the current system, like the current like fiat payment system. But that, yeah, probably needs some collaborative effort.
Or maybe we just need to convince like most of consumption that is made off-chain to go on-chain without like trying to convince like regulatory, just like convince these like companies to, for instance, just an example, issue T-bills directly on-chain, or like buy your stocks directly on-chain, and then it will go like forward. But so that's why I think that we have the centralized stablecoin first, is just because most of the consumption is off-chain. And so I don't know like how many years it would take. I don't have even like a gross like number of years. But if we can move this consumption on-chain, then we don't even need actually this centralized stablecoin that can be censored. So I think that's more the point of view that I am having on that.
Yeah, I think it's all about education still, and the fact that people don't understand what we are doing. For example, if you show liquidity to a person who has never touched crypto in their life, they wouldn't be able to understand anything about it. while you tell them, well, we tokenize the dollar now, the dollar lives on the blockchain, you can buy stocks with that, that's great. So I think there is no duality, it's not binary. Like, you can have some centralized elements still in the blockchain industry, and will have the need for these centralized pieces and elements for the adoption, to bring in more people. But the end goal is for these people to move from the centralized elements to something more decentralized, and basically it would be like a journey from coming in and then decentralizing your solutions, whatever you do on the blockchain.
And what I heard, like from policymakers, is that they are concerned about DeFi as in name only, or Dino as somebody called it, like from the OECD. So they are explicitly kind of afraid of like DeFi just being like a nice name for something that is inherently centralized. So if we want to convince the regulator, we need to become more decentralized and less decentralized.
I think we're lucky enough to be in Europe or in the US, where the government doesn't just kidnap your sister and keeps your keys. So, so I think we're well over time. So
one more question.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Nice.
Brice?
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure it's the proper discussion, but regarding the question that was asked before of having one asset for the settlement, for me, the way I see it at least is if you like decentralization and trustlessness, a bit like what Mark was saying earlier, actually, you become a many stablecoin maximalist, you know? So like if you align with Liquidity's ideal, for instance, you're not a LUSD maxi. You actually want to see more coins like LUSD. And what Robert was just highlighting is the problem is there is none. It's been 2 years and we're still waiting for a project to ship something as resilient as LUSD, because it will actually, you know, pave the path towards more infrastructure. So it will allow us, for instance, to do more stuff with LUSD. Now we have another stablecoin that is as resilient as LUSD we can pair with for liquidity and things like that. So essentially this approach naturally pushes us towards tons of stable coins. Like right now I'm talking about the resilient side, but even on the scalability side, probably there are other trade-offs that makes it so that you need one stablecoin for this, one stablecoin for that. So at the end of the day, for me, I don't see how we avoid hundreds of relevant stablecoin model. And I think the question is more about then the aggregation of stablecoin back into something easy to use and understand for the user. So I don't know if you guys have some view on this maybe?
Well, obviously, I completely agree with you, Brice. And the thing is that it's there's different actors out there that have different needs, and it's completely normal that you have different options for them. And I think a good tell of that, of our position at Aave, is that Aave, we are launching Gold, but you still have LUSD on Aave. And it's more than welcome, and we added LUSD recently on layer 2s as well. And you also have USDC, USDT, you also have DAI, because we have the strong belief at Aave that it's not a zero-sum game, at least not right now. Maybe in 20 years when the stablecoin, on-chain stablecoin market is $20 trillion, maybe we will start fighting each other for market share, but right now we have to grow the pie and increase decentralization and resilience of the ecosystem as a whole. So, and at the end of the day, we are lucky. We have great tools. We have Curve, we have Balancer, we have Maverick, we have Uniswap v3, v4. So it's just a UX problem. If I can freely go from LUSD, then swap in a pool to Go, then move that into USDC, and that's what is credited on my only debit card, and I pay that. I pay my sandwich with this. It's good enough UX. And the user, does he has to know that there's 3 stablecoin oops, if it works, it works.
Well, it's big red letters saying timeout. So thank you very much, and give it up for the speakers once again.